Long before modern climate reports, satellites, and carbon charts, the ancient world experienced a disaster so severe that entire civilizations collapsed almost at the same time. Around 2200 BCE, thriving societies that had dominated their regions for centuries suddenly began to fail. Cities emptied, fields dried up, trade routes vanished, kings lost control. What followed was not a single war or invasion, but something far more terrifying. Nature itself turned against human survival. For generations, people believed their world was stable. The rivers flowed when expected. The rains came in their seasons. Harvests followed familiar cycles. Civilizations like Akkad in Mesopotamia, the Old Kingdom in Egypt, the Indus Valley cities, and settlements across the Levant depended entirely on these patterns. Their power, wealth, and belief systems were built on the assumption that the environment would continue to cooperate. Then, slowly, at first, things changed. Rains began to fail, not for a season, but for years. Rivers shrank, crops withered before reaching maturity. What had once been fertile land turned to dust. Farmers could no longer feed their families, let alone supply cities. Grain stores emptied faster than they could be refilled. Hunger spread, and with hunger came fear. In Mesopotamia, the Akkadian Empire had been the first true empire in history. Its kings ruled vast territories, enforced laws, and controlled trade across the region. But their power rested on agriculture supported by predictable rainfall. When the rains stopped, the system collapsed from the inside. Archaeological evidence shows layers of dust storms where fertile soil once existed. Cities were abandoned, not burned or conquered, but simply left behind. People fled in search of water and food. Borders became meaningless as refugees moved wherever survival was possible. This migration created conflict with neighboring regions that were already struggling. Political authority weakened. Armies could not be fed. Administrators could not collect taxes from empty fields. The empire that once unified the region fragmented into smaller, weaker states. In Egypt, the Old Kingdom had built the pyramids and ruled with divine authority. The pharaoh was believed to maintain cosmic order. As long as the Nile flooded reliably, the system worked. But during this period, Nile floods became dangerously low. Without sufficient flooding, farmland could not be irrigated. Grain production dropped sharply. Famine followed. Texts from the time describe chaos. Order broke down. Tombs were looted. Local leaders rose as central authority faded. For the first time in centuries, Egypt entered a period of political fragmentation and instability. The belief that the pharaoh could control the balance of the world was shaken. Far to the east, the Indus Valley civilization also suffered. Once home to advanced cities with drainage systems, standardized weights, and long-distance trade, it too began to decline. Rivers changed course or dried up. Agricultural zones were abandoned. Urban life faded, replaced by smaller rural settlements struggling to adapt. What makes this event extraordinary is its scale. These collapses were not isolated. They occurred across thousands of kilometers, affecting cultures that had no contact with one another. The common factor was climate. Scientists today refer to this event as the 4.2 kiloyear event, a prolonged period of drought and climate instability that reshaped the ancient world. This was not a single drought lasting a year or two. It was decades of environmental stress. A generation grew up knowing nothing but scarcity. Children born during this time never experienced abundance. Entire belief systems built on prosperity and divine favor were challenged. When food disappears, society unravels quickly. Laws lose meaning when survival is at stake. Moral codes weaken when hunger becomes constant. Communities turn inward, protecting what little they have. Trust erodes. Violence becomes common. Not because people are evil, but because desperation changes behavior. Yet even in collapse, humans adapt. Some societies learned to survive by changing how they lived. They moved closer to remaining water sources. They diversified crops. They reduced dependence on centralized systems. Smaller communities proved more resilient than massive empires. While empires fell, people endured. This disaster reshaped history. The world after 2200 BCE was not the same. Power shifted. New cultures emerged from the ruins of old ones. The lesson written into the soil is clear. No civilization, no matter how advanced, is immune to environmental change. What makes this ancient story deeply relevant today is not just the climate itself, but how societies responded to stress. The collapse was not caused by drought alone. It was caused by over-reliance on fragile systems, rigid political structures, and the belief that the world would always function as it had before. When conditions changed, those systems could not adapt quickly enough. Today, we often think of ancient civilizations as primitive, but they were incredibly sophisticated for their time. Their failure was not ignorance. It was overconfidence. They believed stability was permanent. The 2200 BCE collapse reminds us that resilience matters more than power. Flexibility matters more than size. And humility before nature matters more than control. Archaeologists don't find evidence of massive battles marking the end of these civilizations. Instead, they find empty cities, wind-blown sand, and silence. Collapse did not come with fire and conquest, but with thirst, hunger, and slow abandonment. History does not always end in explosions. Sometimes, it ends in people quietly walking away from everything they built. This ancient climate disaster also changed how humans understood their place in the world. In the aftermath, new religious ideas emerged, emphasizing suffering, endurance, and moral responsibility, rather than guaranteed prosperity. Hardship reshaped belief. Survivors carried lessons forward. They remembered that abundance can vanish, that power can fail, that nature does not negotiate. And yet, humanity did not disappear. It endured, adapted, and rebuilt. New civilizations rose centuries later, shaped by the memory of collapse. Irrigation systems improved. Trade networks diversified. Political systems became more flexible in some regions. The world learned, slowly and painfully, that survival depends on adaptation. When we study the collapse of 2200 BCE, we are not just studying the past. We are studying a mirror, a reminder that progress is not a straight line, that stability is fragile, that the environment sets limits no society can ignore forever. This is not a story meant to inspire fear, but awareness. The ancient world shows us both the consequences of ignoring environmental reality and the strength of human resilience when forced to change. Civilizations fall. Humanity continues. The dust storms of Mesopotamia, the failing Nile floods, the abandoned cities of the Indus Valley, all whisper the same message across 4,000 years of silence. Survival belongs to those who adapt, not those who assume permanence. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it remembers. And the earth always keeps the record.